So I have lots to share, so when I get started here, we had to switch venues, so this is how to have spiritual conversations with secular people. If you're expecting to be, I think, in the public evangelism one, that's upstairs, so in the youth room. All right, let's begin with a word of prayer. Father God, I want to thank you again for this opportunity. I want to thank you for all the people that are here. I pray, Lord, that you would help us to learn and to engage people in spiritual conversations. In your name, amen. This, for those of you that were in my Bible study seminar I just held, we are going to build a foundation first. And if you don't get the foundation, you're not going to have good conversations with people. Period. I know that sounds like pretty dire. It's not hard to understand, but sometimes it's really hard for us to internalize as Adventists. And I'll explain why, okay? But before we do that, we have a large group, so I don't know. Maybe I'll keep questions for the end. Maybe I'll do that this time and get right into it. I want to start off with building a foundation on two principles. Okay? The first one, this is Gospel Workers, page 136. You might want to write the reference down. This is about a vision that Ellen White had about evangelism. This radically changed my life when I read this. I read this over and over and over again. She describes in her vision, or I guess it was a dream, she was sleeping, that her and some friends went to go pick berries. And they went to go berry picking, and they all went out enthusiastic, but eventually she was just left to pick the berries. But she describes in her dream berries just like in this picture. There are ripe berries. There are berries that are yet to be ripe. There are berries on the ground that are overripe. And she was so concerned because there were so many ripe berries, but you had to find them and look for them and look under leaves and pick them and so on. And then she describes this as people. This is how we're supposed to see people. Now, friends, let me just ask you a simple question. You go blueberry picking. These are high bush blueberries. I love berry picking, by the way. This is the bush that you're standing in front of. What berries are you going to pick? The ripe ones, right? That you would not pay the farmer or whoever money for a bucket full of white berries. You wouldn't even do it for the pink ones, right? You want blueberries that are ripe. This is critical to understanding how we approach people. Because, folks, not everybody is ripe. Period. Now you can take a big breath. That means, simply put, that you don't have to somehow spiritually jump every person that you're sitting beside on an airplane or a bus or you work with, thinking that you're under the gun because you need to share Jesus with a person because they could die over the weekend. Folks, who knows the ripeness of the fruit that we're talking about? God. That is critical to understand. And there's another point that's really critical to understand. Who doesn't know how ripe the fruit is? We don't. Now, folks, remember, we're talking about people that we're just meeting. We're talking about some friends, neighbors, co-workers, whatever. Maybe we've known them for a little while, but we don't really know how ripe they are. I mean, unless it's really obvious. But this, folks, I can't tell you how important this is to understand and to internalize this, because if you don't get this principle, you are going to be one miserable friend. Period. Because you're going to be a friend that is always trying to spiritually jump somebody that's not wanting to be spiritually jumped. They aren't going to want to be around you. And then you'll say, oh, their hearts are just hard. They're rejecting the truth. I'm under persecution. That's a little baloney. Come on. All right, second principle is the bucket of water. I want you, and I wish I said I could come up with this on my own. I read this in a book and I thought about it and I'm like, man, I've got to steal this idea. This bucket represents a person. This is a person. The water in the bucket is the steps involved to get a person to a decision for Jesus Christ. When the water flows over, like you see in this bucket, it's starting to spill over, that's when they've made a decision for Christ and are getting baptized. Okay? Our job, friends, now listen very carefully, this one's even harder for Adventists. Our job is to put our drop in the bucket, not to fill it. Now you can take another breath. It takes a lot of pressure off. Because, friends, if the bucket doesn't have any drops in it, what are you going to do? If you think that the whole point is that I've got to get them to a decision for Jesus and baptism, part of the remnant Church of God, in a month, you're under the gun. Again, you're going to be a miserable friend. But if you understand that my role is to come in and put my drops in there, guess what you'll also discover, friends? Somebody else has put drops in there long before you ever came along. And you're not the only one putting drops in there. Okay? There may be some Baptists that put some drops in there. There may have been a book they read, or even a movie they watched. Because I was reading it this morning in Steps to Christ, in one chapter, in just a few paragraphs, how many times she said, Christ is constantly drawing people to Him, constantly drawing over and over and over. God is at work on people everywhere. The fact that somebody needs to make a decision for Jesus is not your idea. And it's not your responsibility. Now does God want you to labor in His vineyard? Yes. But let's put the responsibility where it belongs. It's on the shoulders of God. The Bible says over and over again that I am just a tool or an instrument, and I haven't met an effective tool yet that told the master what to do. Okay? The Bible says that we are God's workmanship. We're His tool. Okay? He will use us. So with those two principles in mind, the first principle is not everybody is right. The second part is it's my job to do put my drops in. Now it could be that when you put your drops in, that's when the decision happens. But it could be that the bucket's only a quarter of the way full. And there's a lot more that needs to take place. Right? But oftentimes the people that get all the credit are the ones that come in and get the final decision. But they're not the ones that have done the long, hard work. I worked at an academy before I went to seminary, and we baptized a lot of the students. And over, I was trying to get the students to go back to their home churches and get baptized there. Not at the church. There's a boarding academy. Why? Because there were Sabbath school teachers, parents, other church members, the pastor that was there, that did far more work in getting these kids to that point than me, who came in and did the Bible studies with them, and they made the decision. But if I baptized them, it looks like I did this great work. Did I have drops I put in? Yeah. But so did other people, right? And we need to affirm that. Okay? So our goal, ultimately, is to get this to fill up and make a decision. That's our goal. And we never deviate from that goal. But we have to recognize that not everybody is full. Right? That's important in our conversations with people. All right. Does anybody have any questions about that foundation before we go on any further? Anyone want to argue with me about that? Okay, yeah. Go ahead.
I'm going to argue about the fact that the young people should not go back to their home churches for the simple reason that you've forgotten the peer pressure and the peer association of those people that are in school with them. They want to do it in front of their peers more than they want to do it with their parents.
You're misunderstanding me. We would allow that but we always try to encourage them to go back to their home churches, because it's their home churches that need to continue discipling them.
Oh, I agree.
Do you know what I mean? It's their home churches they need to learn to serve in, right? The academy period is very short, and it's a bubble of an environment. So we're trying to integrate them back into the church. If all they associate with positive spiritual things is the school, when the school time is done and the church is left, what are they going to do with church? Gone. So it's just working together. It didn't always happen that way. I mean, we had kids from Newfoundland that I baptized in Ontario at Kingsway because they wanted to do it in front of their friends. But guess what? Family and some friends flew in all the way from Newfoundland to Ontario to witness the event. And that was important. So we always try to do first things first. But that's not the point of the seminar. So I'm just clearing that up. Okay, let's continue. Any other questions before I go on? So we built the foundation, right? All right, let's get into it. Now, for those of you that were not in my Bible study seminar, I'm just going to give you practical principles that I have learned in my own personal experience. This is not a textbook lecture. If you needed a textbook lecture, just go buy the book and read it at home. Okay? This is just stuff I have learned in talking with people. Okay? That's all it is. And you're free to argue with me or disagree with me. This is what I've learned about what not to do and what to do. Okay? So it's going to be very practical. All right? So, number one, very important. There's no formula in how you talk with a person who is secular, who is unchurched, who you are not clear on their spiritual well-being. Because, we learned this in my Bible study session, those who are not there, people are not what? They're not machines. They're not computers. They're not something, a program that you just type certain things and automatically they're going to want to do a Bible study or automatically they're going to want to do this. There is no formula. So, let's continue. Number two. These are all going to fit together. You need to be connected to Christ. Because, folks, the reality is you just don't know when that opportunity is going to come. And if God opens that opportunity, you need to be ready. And you say, well, how do I be connected to Christ? How does that work in a practical manner? Very simple. You submit yourself to Jesus every day. And say, Lord, be the King of my life and my Savior. And you know what? God's going to bring opportunities. And I ask Him for one other thing. Give me the eyes and the discernment to get that this is an opportunity. Or it's not an opportunity. That's just as important because you can turn an unripe berry off, right? You can turn you know what? You pick an unripe berry. What happens? You throw the unripe berry on the ground, right? It's useless. You can't do that. It's like yesterday, I had 3 flights to get here. First flight, I sat beside Marge. Found out Marge was a Seventh-day Adventist, an older lady. But I had a great conversation with her. She was just a hoot. And we just talked and so on and so forth. And we were able to talk about spiritual things, and so it was all good. The next 2 guys I sat beside made it clear to me that they are not interested in even knowing my name. One guy kept the newspaper right in front of his face and off to the side a little bit. Right? No conversation. The next guy, he was grading an honors thesis. He's a professor at the University of Saskatchewan. He was deeply involved in his work. Now, I could have taken it upon myself if I didn't understand the first 2 principles we covered. I have to have a spiritual conversation with this person because, you know, their salvation might be at stake. And I've heard this before too. Mine might be at stake too if I don't. Okay? That's not how it works, friends. Sometimes you have these experiences like I picked up a hitchhiker one time, had an amazingly spiritual conversation with him. I picked up another hitchhiker and tried to do that, and I thought he was going to kill me. Right? You got to understand that principle, and so be connected to Christ. Look for the opportunities will come. You look for them and ask God to give you the discernment to know. Okay? Always be friendly. Don't be unfriendly. I mean, you're not going to be able to have any conversation with people. How are some things, that practical ways, how can we be friendly? You give me just a few things. If somebody was trying to be friendly with you, smile. What would you appreciate?
Smile.
I was waiting for that. The first thing is a smile. Right? If you're trying to attract people to Jesus, and you've got the most miserable, sour disposition, and you're complaining all the time, and then you say, hey, by the way, let me tell you about Jesus. The person's like, are you kidding me? I don't want to be as miserable as you are. I'm pretty happy right now, actually. Right? Be friendly. How else can we be friendly? Give it more.
Offer help.
Offer help. That's a good one. I often find it's good to offer help when you know that there's a need for help.
That's
right?
That's right.
And the help's got to be specific. Say, hey, I can help with that. And whatever. We're going to get into that in a little bit. Okay. Here's my favorite one. Ask questions. And I have Air Canada here. I put these in there so I remember the illustrations. I remember all of us pastors from the Maritime Conference were asked to go to Toronto for an evangelism training session that It Is Written was putting on. In fact, all the pastors from the union came in. And so we were in Toronto. We had the session with Bill Santos, Henry Fire Robin, Mark Finley. Jeff Potts was there and gave a presentation. It was the first time I met Jeff. It was actually the weekend or right after, I think Bill Santos was picked to be the speaker of It Is Written. And so, there's stuff going on. And at the end, of course, we had to fly back home. So all of us pastors from the Maritime Conference were in the same line to get our boarding passes for our tickets. I was last. So I'm sitting there, and every guy goes through. Now, I'm not critiquing them for this. Okay? I'm just telling you what happened. Every guy goes through, and then it's me. I noticed that the guy who's working there seems of Arab descent. He didn't have like a turban on or anything like that. He didn't have, but he did not look, his accent betrayed him, and also his looks betrayed him. And I told this to the people in the Bible study session, I just love to ask people questions about what they do and what interests them, because there's so much I don't know. So I just ask questions. So I'm standing there, and all the other pastors are waiting for me to get my boarding pass. And I'm standing there, and this guy's just typing this thing in there, and I said, hey, by the way, do you like your job? That's all I asked. He looked up at me, and he was like, well, it's a job. I mean, it's okay. And he thought about it. It's okay. I don't know if I want to do this all the time, but it's okay. Then he turns to me and says, well, what do you do for work? An opportunity is opening up, right? Do you see? I wasn't looking for an opportunity, friends, but it started to open up to me. So I said to him, well, I'm a pastor of a church, of a Christian church. And he looked at me and he said, really? He said, I'm not religious, and I don't know what I believe, but I know I want to believe in something. We're talking, this is over a 15-second period. Do you see how a question, an innocent question, now, I've asked lots of questions of people, and they don't go there, okay? Other times they do. I'll give you another story in a second. But my only regret is I didn't have anything to give him. You got to be prepared, and I was not prepared. I wasn't expecting it, and I wished I would have had like a Discover Bible card, like a Roland Bible card, and said, "Hey, I got these free Bible lessons, and I'd love to send some to you. Can I just get your name and address?" Because there wasn't the time to have a long dialogue, right? Anyway, I get done the conversation, and other pastors have no idea what's going on, but they know it's taking too long. They feel they're getting antsy. So I come over with my suitcase, like this or whatever. What were you doing? I was just having a conversation with that guy about doing Bible studies. And they were just shocked, because every one of them had talked to the same guy, but they just saw him as a ticket agent, do his job, give me my boarding pass, and again, I'm not criticizing them. And to be honest, that's really all I was there for too. But I said, we're standing here, why not ask a question? That's all I did. Don't dismiss the importance of asking questions. Not personal questions. What's your waist size, or how much do you weigh? Nothing like that, okay? I hope I don't have to say that. But not personal questions either. You don't just lead in with a very personal, they don't know you, right? Don't do that, right? You have to earn that right. And you will earn it over time. Another thing I do, and this can apply to both men and women. Well, I don't do it as much anymore because you can see, but when I used to have to get haircuts, I always went to the same place and knew when the person was working and had the same hairdresser every time. And we developed a relationship everywhere I went. And I would just ask them about hairdressing. And one day, this girl that I always went to, she had a book there called The Shack. And she was reading it. I had heard about it. I didn't know anything about it. So I asked her, hey, are you reading The Shack? She's like, yeah. I said, could you tell me about it? So she started sharing with me about The Shack. And she started telling me about the spiritual elements. She didn't know what to believe about it, and what it was, and it opened up the door to a conversation as she was doing. And I'd love to say that she's in the Adventist church and she's a Bible worker and all that. It didn't come to that, but we developed a relationship. Okay? So, what I'm saying is ask questions. Don't dismiss the importance of asking. Take an interest in people. Not too much of an interest, but an interest. You know what I mean? A healthy interest. You know, please, I know a pastor, it's a true story. I gotta say this. I know a pastor who used to go up to people's houses and look in their windows like this. Okay? Yeah, true. Adventist pastor. Okay? Not to peep at women or anything, but that's what before he would knock on the door or anything, he did it to members and non-members alike. Okay? That's not the approach, folks. Okay? And you can do that with your questions too. You can be a peeping Tom with your questions. Okay? Alright? Okay, this was, somebody brought this up. Before offering your help, guys, intangible, specific, I'm gonna do it ways. We're great at hearing somebody going through a hard time and say, I'll pray for you. No, pray for him now. Right there. Say, hey, we should take this to God. You know, now I'm talking in a Christian context. But somebody says they're struggling with something, ask them, is there anything I can do to help you? And they're expecting everybody to say that, right? And they'll say, well, no, not really. I say, well, you know, do you need someone to look after your kids? Or how are you managing financially with this thing, you know? If I've got the money on me, I'll give them $20. Right there. Right there on the spot. And they'll be like, oh, no. So I say, no, I tell them, I say, I'm not taking this 20 back. It's either going to sit on the floor, somebody else is going to get it, or you're going to take it. And I'm just that stubborn. And they'll be like, oh, okay, thanks. And they'll pick it up, right? My house burnt down years ago and we had no insurance. And let me tell you something, folks. It's much easier to give than it is to receive. There's a pride issue in receiving. Okay? So people have a hard time receiving sometimes. So they need to be gently encouraged. No, I really need it. I want you to have this. I want to help you. Okay? Don't give offhanded help. Okay? Like, oh yeah, okay. No. Invest in people. Okay? Now, this is an interesting point. An ongoing dialogue. I do not mean by this an ongoing dialogue with the person. You need to, when you're talking to people, having an ongoing dialogue with God. Serena is a friend of mine. She's 21 now, I think. 21. And she was coming to a spiritual crisis in her life. I had no idea what the crisis was. She would never reveal it to me. But it was like, she'd been going through it for months. And we were sitting together somewhere, and she was just a mess. She wouldn't tell me what was going on. Her parents knew. Her parents had told her what kind of a failure she was and how disappointed they were in her. And they couldn't believe that she had acted this way, and so on. And here I am, and I'm giving her all the classic things. You know, God will forgive you. 1 John 1 and 9, if you confess your sins. And you know what Serena turns around and says to me? She says, I know all that stuff. It doesn't work. Oh, my dear, I'm out of tools. Now what am I going to do?
Pray with her.
Well, that might have been a good idea. I prayed to God first. And I said to the Lord, she's sitting there, she's crying, she's hiding behind her long, thick hair. And I said, Lord, what on earth do I do in this situation? What does Serena need? And so we're sitting on the same couch. I'm on one side, she's on the other, and her iPhone is in the middle. I kid you not, this is a true story. The impression came to me, ask her for her iPhone. Because what I had been telling her is that forgiveness and asking Christ into your life is just simply accepting it. And I could tell she hadn't accepted it, but she thought she had because she says everyone knows that. I've tried that. It doesn't work. Remember? Ask her for her iPhone. I'm like, okay, Lord. Serena, can I have your iPhone? Oh, yeah, sure. She thought I probably wanted to play Angry Birds or something. I don't know, right? And then I put the iPhone right back and said, can I have your iPhone? Did that 4 times, folks. What? She turned to me and she said, why do you keep asking me for my stupid iPhone? I said, because, I asked for it and you give it to me and I just took it. Then I thought she was crying before. She bawled after that. She accepted Christ, received him into her life in reality in that moment. I baptized Serena several months later. Friends, I never would have came to that on my own. Keep an ongoing dialogue with God, and you can't do that unless you've done this every day. Right? One lays into the other, okay? Good. Any questions so far? Good? All right. I know this sounds strange. Don't have an agenda, but have an agenda. We need to have intentional relationships with people that we hope to lead them to Christ. But we need to come across like we're not doing that. And you need to treat them that you're going to be their friend whether they accept Christ or not. That's the reality. But we always have that agenda as Christians. You have to. We are not just put on this earth to worship God on Sabbath and rest in our own salvation and drink lemonade Sabbath afternoon. We're here to win people. But you can't come across like you have an agenda. I don't know if you've ever seen those people that have an agenda. Or maybe those salesmen who the only time they're interested in you is when you're going to try to have a potential sale. And if you've got no sale for them, they're not interested in you. We can act like that as Christians. I'm interested in you as long as you keep making spiritual decisions that I care about. But I don't really care about you. I just want you to do what I want you to do. And folks, I was like that. I used to do door-to-door insurance sales. They told you to have an agenda with people. And let me tell you, the only reason I was in those houses visiting those people is because I wanted commission on the sale for insurance. I didn't hang out with those people. I didn't see them again for another 6 months until I was in the area. Then I wanted to be their friend for that few minutes, try to get them another policy or whatever, get them to renew the policy they just bought for me 6 months before, but other than that, I was not interested. Folks, we can do that with the gospel with people. So don't have an agenda, but have an agenda. You've got to ask God for the discernment to be an authentic person. Win their trust and become their friends for real. Not their friends because you really don't want to be their friend, but you think you should act like you want to be their friend so that they can know Jesus. You know the difference? Really become their friend. Now here's an important point. I don't remember if I had this in a later slide, so this is a very important point. It's probably not going to be there. You can only at most invest in 3 people at any given time in this kind of relationship. No more. And you know what? God doesn't expect you to invest in any more. It's not your job to win your entire community to Jesus. Okay? It just isn't. We're talking about deep investment in relationships here, guys. And if postmodern people, secular people, one thing that they are sick of is people with an agenda that don't really care, but they're dying for relationships. They're lonely. We're more connected than we ever have been, but we're also more alienated from each other than we ever have been. People are lonely. Terribly lonely. Terribly lonely. Obviously, pray, pray, pray. You've got to be a person of prayer. Lift that person up in prayer. If you have a conversation with that person, make sure that if you have a bad memory, as soon as you're done talking to them, you have a little thing on your phone, or if you don't do phones, you got a little thing, you write their name down and say, hey, I need to pray about this for them. They might not even know that you're praying for them, but pray for them anyway. But if they talk to you the next time and say, hey, you won't believe, I just had a breakthrough with this. I can't believe what happened. It's just been an amazing week. I'd say, awesome. I've been hoping and praying that this would happen for you. And they would be like, what? You know, friends, no matter where somebody has been spiritually, whether they were 0 or 10, I have never ever had in any conversation with a person I've asked, you always ask, can I pray for you? I've never ever once had a no. Never. Even people that were not religious in the least bit, you say, you know, when I have these kind of problems, I pray about it. Do you mind if I just have a prayer right now for you? Most people start crying as soon as you say that. It's true. Right? You may find this hardcore secular atheist that's like, absolutely not, but that doesn't mean you can't pray for them at home. Right? This isn't on the screen. There's another good question to ask people that are struggling with whether they want to believe or not, and the idea of prayer and whatever. What could I pray about that would make God real in your life to you? What is the one thing I could pray for that would make God real to you, that you knew He was real? Because every one of us, let's face it, folks, you can think about it right now, every one of us is facing a situation that we think is just impossible. Or many of them. Could be with yourself, could be with family, alienation, something that's going on, but we've got this mountain in front of us and we're just like, this, I can't fix this and no one can. What do I need to pray for you that would make God real in your life? Good question, right? All right, look for opportunities to help them or someone they care about. So don't just, you can offer to help, but also just look for opportunities to help them, right? They may mention offhandedly, you ask them, we're going to get into invitations in a second, but you ask them to come to your house for barbecue Sunday afternoon. They say, oh, I can't. I've got this thing where I've got my yard. I haven't cleaned it up all spring, and I got to get the leaves off my yard. Hey, do you mind if I come over and help you with that?
I know.
I love yard work, and I need some exercise. Do you mind if I come over and just rake the lawn with you?
Yeah, come on over.
Okay, somebody's raising their hand. Yeah, come on over. Yeah, come on over. No, this is a seminar, folks. I'm flying out of here tomorrow. Okay, so all right. I already did my lawn. All right, I already covered ask questions. Listen. People need to know more that you are listening than what you have to say. Because listening builds up trust. Have you ever had a conversation with a person, let's be honest, and we've all done it to people, but you know that somebody is not really listening to you, that instead they are framing an argument against you before you're even done speaking? Yeah, everyone's laughing. They're like, yeah, I've done that, or you know, people just, they're not engaged. They're not giving you the eye contact. Their body language is saying, I really don't care what you're talking about at this time. I'm just tolerating you. You ever have that experience? Yeah. But have you also had the experience where you know someone was listening to you and empathizing with you? Did you feel ministered to at that moment? Think about it. My wife has been fighting cancer for just over a year. In fact, she just had her 7th surgery a couple days before I had to come here. Had a very, very difficult time. When we first found out, we thought in 3 months she was going to be dead. Okay, it was devastating. Words can't describe. If you've never been through that experience, words can't describe it. But I remember so many people at the seminary, the Seventh-day Adventist Theological Seminary, when they found out, hey man, I'm praying for you. Gone. That still happens all the time, by the way. Sometimes I feel like asking them, really? But then I was at a party. It wasn't my party. It was a party for my daughter and her class at someone's house. And a childhood friend and I have connected in Bearwood Springs. She's lived there for a long time now. And she dropped her daughter off, and she saw me there in the living room. This was just after we had gotten the news. And she sat there, and we just talked. She did not take her eyes off me for a second. And when I was really struggling in the conversation, she was starting to tear up. I never felt more ministered to during this whole time than by her. She wasn't a pastor. She wasn't a chaplain. She's not a trained counselor or psychiatrist or anything. She was just being my friend. She didn't give me any advice. That's a bad one. She didn't give me any advice. She listened and she empathized with me. And if I could have taken her home with me, I would have in that moment. I'm serious. Words can't describe how much that meant to me at that time. Guys, there's people dealing with stuff all around you. But all you need is you to listen. You want to get mileage with people? Listen. I know this thing is how to talk to spiritual people. It really should be how to, secular people, how to listen. That's what it should be called, really, because that's where you get a lot of traction with people. Okay? Share meals. Have people over at your house. Have a barbecue. Have a block party. Right? Get to know your neighbors. Talk to your neighbors. Find out what their interests are. That's what we did. We moved in Berrien Springs, and it was the second day we were there. So we got the truck, and we got all the stuff in. The second day, there's ding dong, the doorbell goes, and there's this older lady with a baked, fresh peach pie that she had just made for us. I'd never had peach pie in my life at that point. And she's like, "My name is Dixie. My husband Dick is next door. We're your neighbors. We're so glad you're in the neighborhood. This neighborhood here, this is their names, and this is their names. This is what they do for work. This is what they do, and so on. We just love people. And we're so glad. Oh, you have children. This is wonderful. We love kids." And so Dick and Dixie have looked after our children while we had to deal with the cancer thing. We're going fishing together. We're going golfing together. He just caught some... I don't know if I should say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. We have a mutual love for fishing and fish. He just caught some salmon, and he brought over 4 filleted salmon steaks over to my house. Not knowing I don't eat fish much anymore, but that's okay. I accepted it and everything. That's awesome. That's ministry. That's whatever. You know what? We didn't talk about the Lord or anything like that, but it opens the door. And we've had conversations about my wife. We've had conversations about what we're going through. We wouldn't have done that with them if they had just remained over on their turf and just waved to us as they mowed the lawn, or something like that. The fact that they took an interest in us opened the door for conversation. You see what I'm saying? Share meals. We were meant to eat together. You realize that? You guys, in Acts chapter 15, describes a meeting where Jews and Gentiles, should the Gentiles be circumcised or not? Do you know that the real issue there is that the Jews and the Gentiles were no longer eating together as a church? You had the Gentiles over here eating, you had the Jews over here eating, and if you look at all the things the apostles told them, it had to do with table fellowship. And issues that were dividing them was food. And he's like, don't let that divide you. Share meals together. We were meant to eat together. That's why we like potlucks, right? We do, most of the time. They got some good food. It's the fellowship. Have fun together. Now, I hope I don't have to tell you this, but this was a revelation to me. There's a difference between girls and guys and how they like to have fun and how they bond. Girls bond through what? Talking. Guys bond through doing stuff together. That's just what that's what guys will go to the golf game, together. Hit some strokes and talk about work.
And weather.
And weather. That's right. That's right. That's how guys bond. Girls, they're content to sit in the living room, whatever. Let's do each other's nails. But they're not really there to do nails. It's to talk. Right? So you got to be sensitive to that, right? Understand that. I know there's some exceptions here and there, but generally the principle's true. Pray and look for opportunities to witness, not to preach. What's the difference between preaching to somebody and witnessing to somebody?
The agenda.
Okay, there's an agenda, but I'm talking about more or less in the methodology.
Sharing your story.
That's right. You're sharing your story. You're sharing your personal experience. What's preaching?
Telling.
Yeah, you're talking to them and you're telling them, and this is what you need to do, right? That's different, but witnessing, it can be simply something like this. You know, you could say, well, I'll do the difference between preaching and witnessing. Okay, so preaching.
4 minutes.
Okay, oh boy. You need to accept Christ, Brittany. You have to do it, you know, or this is the truth, da-da-da-da. Or you can say something like this. You say, you know, I know life is hectic for me too, Brittany, but you know what I have found? I've found that I can take off one day a week. I take off Saturday, and I do that because it's the Sabbath. That God created for us to have a break. It's just been such a blessing to me. See the difference? To win it, you got to keep the Sabbath. Or you should keep the Sabbath. The Bible says you should keep the Sabbath. If you look at advertising today, folks, and compared to advertising back 20, 30, 40 years ago, it was all about the car has these features, this is what it does, everything. If you look at car commercials today, it's all about the experience. It's racing through the streets. Those ones where the Nissans fly through the... Why? They're trying to say that the experience of the car is what it's all about. Okay? We need to talk about our experience with the truth, and that opens the door to the features of the truth. You see what I'm saying? This is how you have conversations. Okay, we got to move quickly. Tom's looking at me. Don't be afraid to just insert little tidbits at a time. You don't have to say big, long, convoluted Bible studies with people in conversations. Just dropping little things once in a while can do an amazing thing in people's lives. You say, well, what are those things? Well, you have to let the Lord lead you in those things. But don't be afraid of just, well, I didn't tell them everything about this. Don't worry about it. Just get the ball rolling so they're thinking about it. Those conversations will come up later. Okay, use the 3 F's. Feel, felt, found. Right? What's that mean? Somebody tells you something, you say, you know what? I understand how you feel. Or, man, I really don't understand how you feel. If you don't understand how they feel, don't say you understand how they feel. Please. Or I could see how you feel that way. Right? And you say, and you know what? Many other people have felt that way too. And the reason you say that is because oftentimes when we're going through a difficult time, we think we're the only ones that have gone through this difficult time. And we need to know that other people, we're not an exception. Lastly, but you know what I found? Again, what are you doing here? You're witnessing, right? This is what I have found. Or this is what I have discovered. Right? Feel, felt, found. Ask them to give the Bible a try. Now look what I put here in parentheses. This is so important, folks. Most reject, I'm talking about the Bible or Christianity, out of what they don't know, not out of what they do know. They heard somebody say something about it, and so they think that's what it's about. And you realize that's not really what it's about. They have these ideas of Christianity that just aren't true. Okay? I wish we had more time talking, so I got to speed up. Okay? A few verses at a time or a story, and then leave it with them. So, for example, you're progressing in this relationship, and you're talking about the Sabbath, for example. It is better for them to read it out of the Bible for themselves than for you to tell them what the Bible says. And so, they say, you know what? I don't really know about this Sabbath thing. You say, you know what? You have questions, that's great. You take a piece of paper, you write down 3 verses, say, hey, why don't you take this home this week and take a look at it, and then we can talk about it later. And leave it there. They'll go home, and you know what they'll do? If they're really interested, they'll look up those verses for themselves, and then they'll say, I wonder what else the Bible says about this subject. And they'll start going through it. I know one pastor that got somebody to give a Bible study on how Sunday was the day of worship, not Sabbath. And the guy came to the Bible study, and he didn't know that the pastor was an Adventist. It was a small group study. And the guy came, he said, Pastor, you don't understand. We're not supposed to be worshiping on Sunday. I checked the whole Bible. Saturday's the Sabbath. We need to start keeping the Sabbath. He's like, really? And so they went through the study with him and everything like that. And he's like, wow, that's fascinating, right? And this guy gave the Bible study to all these other people. The pastor was the only one that was an Adventist, and he gave the Bible study on the Sabbath. Right? He found it for himself. Okay, let's see. Make sure that they know whatever they decide, you're still their friend. Okay? You got to still be people's friends if they don't decide the way you want them to. I already talked about that, 3 investments at a time. Invite them to a small group or church connect events. And what's your job if you invite them somewhere and they come? You stay with them. You got to protect them. And you say, what? Protect them? I've lost people because church members have destroyed them. Sadly. Belong. People need to belong before they believe. I wish we had more time. They need to belong before they believe. Make them feel part of a group. We always did believing before belonging. Let's reverse it. What does that mean? You baptize people not knowing anything about the Bible? No, you can make people be belonging to a group without them being baptized. Get them involved in the life of the church before they're baptized. If you've got an activity going on, invite them to be part of it. Say, hey, a group of us are going out and we're doing this together. I'm wondering if you'd like to be a part of it. Get them involved in doing things. There's no harm in doing that. Be patient. What's this? It's a marathon, not a sprint. This just goes back to the whole bucket thing, right? And I think this is the last point. Let me make sure. No? Okay. I got 2 more ideas. Be humble. Be humble. Guess what, folks? This may shock you, but I don't know everything. But guess what? You don't either. And guess what? You might have something to learn from that. Be humble. Be humble. You are not the exalted Christian strutting into their life, telling them how everything works. Because if we're honest with each other, we got things that are not working in our lives. Come on. Be humble. Let's get real. All right? Let's have an honesty with people. Lastly, last 2 points. Practice your Christianity in a discreet, tactful, and respectful manner. Okay? Do not be bombastic and at people and everything. Do things in a very discreet, tactful way. Jesus, it says in Steps to Christ, that Jesus, even in his sternest rebukes, had tears in his eyes. He was tactful. He never caused any unnecessary suffering. Okay? Don't be bombastic. Be humble. And lastly, and this is probably the most important, you know what, friends? When we're talking with people, leave the results with God. If somebody doesn't make a decision, guess what? It's not your fault. It's okay. It's okay. God's not done with them yet. It's like my kids. I have a 14-year-old and 11-year-old. And there's things they do that I can't stand that I wish they wouldn't do. But you know what I'm learning? They still have a lot of life left ahead of them. I got to just take it easy. Let them grow. Let them fail. Let them discover that some of the idols that they have in their lives are not really worth it. I can tell them that all day long. Alright? I guess we don't have time for questions. Thank you so much. If you want to talk to me afterwards, I'll be available. God bless.